What do Halle Bailey and Keke Palmer have in common? They both deal with narcissistic men.
The busted baby daddies are out here losing their minds. First it was DVD LMNOP, and now it's Skai Jackson's baby daddy?
These are black, young, successful women who have created a career for themselves, have made their own money, do their own thing. And it's like this baby daddy is low-key overpowering that.
There needs to be some sort of scientific research on the sheltered, innocent girl to toxic, abusive boyfriend trope. Like, there needs to be some type of study on that because it's becoming an epidemic.
We are missing an entire segment of adolescence that is very, very important developmentally. We aren't given the space to figure these things out, have these kinds of trials and experiences in the safety of adults that are supposed to be safe spaces, to be able to guide you through these things safely so that you are not experiencing these kinds of relationships for the very first time as an adult. And now moving into only a second or a third relationship, now you are a parent.
Hey everyone, it's Bree. Welcome to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about how growing up sheltered affects your dating life. This is a conversation that I've seen a lot online among the news with Halle Bailey and DDG, Skai Jackson and Yerky. Every time I say that boy's name, I can't. As well as Keke Palmer and Darius. People have been discussing, more specifically within the Black community, about how Black girls are heavily sheltered growing up and how that can lead them into getting into these toxic relationships. And I found this conversation to be very interesting as someone that grew up very sheltered. I made a whole video about it on this channel, and a lot of you guys could relate to it, and not just people like within my community, even people outside of my community as well. But I think it's a very important conversation to have about how sheltering your child can do more damage. And I understand the motivation behind it, right? Like, obviously you want to protect your child, you don't want your child to experience anything bad, but unfortunately, whether they experience it as a kid or as an adult, life is gonna life and you're gonna have to experience things. And so I think that when it comes to dating, it's probably safer to do it in the comfort of your own home and build that relationship with your child to make sure that you're having that open communication and you're able to not only teach them what they should be looking for and how to go about dating, but also being able to create that safe space for them when they do go through their first heartbreak, right? And I think that that's something that I wish I was able to have. You know, I've always said that I absolutely hate that I had to experience my first heartbreak at 22. Like, that was just, that won't it. That was not it. And the reason why it was so hard for me, which again, I've seen a lot of other women share the same sentiment, right? Is that when you're older, the stakes are higher. Like, when you're going through a breakup in high school, not to say that doesn't still hurt really bad and you're not still going through it, but I feel like when you're in high school, like, you know, you have a lot of other things going on and happening that you can kind of put your focus into. And, you know, at that point in time, you're not necessarily thinking about like marriage and long-term commitments. And so I think that even though it still could hurt just as much, it makes it easier to work through that because, one, once you graduate high school, you now have, you know, college and you're now opened up to the rest of the world. But also you have the comfort of, well, hopefully you have the comfort of your parents, right, to kind of help you through, you know, those emotions. And again, I think it's a blessing when you're able to have that growing up. But for a lot of us, we grow up in households where, you know, you're not allowed to date and you're told to just focus on school and focus on your studies. And for some of us, that still carries on to college as well. The only thing is that when you get to college and you're out of your parents' house, they don't have as much control over, you know, what you do, who you talk to, and whether or not you date, because they don't have like that 24/7 surveillance over you. So that's really the time that you start exploring. And again, if you were not allowed the space to explore when you were younger, you're starting fresh. And when you are someone that is sheltered and you're being mixed in with people that weren't, your life experience isn't where everyone else's is. So there's a lot of stuff that, again, you don't know what to look out for, and you're just very naive when it comes to relationships. And even if you try to, learn through watching other people, or, nowadays we have social media and we have all these podcasts and all these different forms of media that people are consuming, they're getting all their information secondhand and taking all that in. It still is different from the actual experience that you get yourself when you are dating. And again, obviously we don't know these people personally, but again, there's been a lot of conversations around how, with Halle, with Keke, and with Skai, that them maybe growing up the way that they grew up and them just now starting to date and figure out what they like and don't like, how it contributed to them picking people that were not great. Because maybe they had some things that they needed to work through, or again, sometimes just lack of experience. You don't quite know what you're looking out for. You don't know what boundaries you need to have. And it's tough, when you are already an adult and you're dealing with people that do have that experience, because then the people that have those experiences can take advantage of you. Now, obviously that doesn't happen all the time, but again, when you are a naive girl who has no dating experience, dating a guy that has a lot of dating experience, it is an imbalance, and there is a power dynamic there.
Unlike all my white friends growing up, I had zero experience with men. I fear that made me the easy target for a narcissist. So if you think about it, my first ever kind of like situationship was with a narcissist. And I have a hot take, because a lot of Black girls, we don't have a lot of dating experience growing up. A lot of us don't know what's okay and what's not. And obviously, it's really easy to say that you know something until you actually experience it. So I really went into this whole thing like, oh yeah, I know, and that could never happen to me, and I could never be, on the short end of the stick. Well, I was wrong. I was very wrong. With that being said, I feel like I am starting my whole romantic journey from square one with not really knowing a lot of things compared to other girls who probably, have so much experience.
If you try to protect your child too much, when they get outside, they're not gonna know what to do. When you make things seem so taboo for a child, it just makes them want to do it more. It makes them want to explore that more. And then they're exploring it without any type of knowledge or just clear navigation on what to do in certain situations. I did not have that.
Hey everyone, this video is sponsored by Godfrey. Godfrey is a small family-owned beauty brand based in Texas. They recently sent me their instant eyebrow tint, which is great for achieving salon quality brows right in the comfort of your own home. This tint is free from parabens, harsh odors, and chemicals, making it perfect for sensitive skin, which is great for me because my skin is super sensitive. And it's also cruelty-free and vegan. Their kit comes with easy instructions that you can follow in 3 easy steps in under 3 minutes. And it can outlast a sweaty day or even a trip to the pool. And here is the before and after. As you can see, my brows are nice and tinted, and I don't have to worry about retinting them for another 2 to 3 weeks. If you want to save time on your makeup routine and wake up to amazing brows, make sure you guys check out the link in my description and use my code BREATHE30 for 30% off your purchase. And thank you once again to Godfrey for sponsoring this video. And now let's hop into this topic. And I mentioned earlier about how when you are younger, it's a little bit easier to kind of move on and move forward, because when you are an adult, and again, this doesn't apply to everybody, but for some people, when you start dating later in life, like not even just your early 20s, like there are people who are getting into their first relationships at 30, like in their mid 30s. And when you are older, just now starting to date, just now getting those experiences, your mindset is different. And again, this obviously doesn't apply to everybody, but there's a lot of people out there who, they want a long-term commitment. They want marriage. And so they're going into dating with that mindset. Cause that's how I was. Like I was at a point where, like, again, I've never really been like the date around type and I got to get stuff out my system and I want to play the field. That's never been me. I've always been like, let me just find my person, and be done. I've been like that since, even a young age. And so for me, I was always very intentional about who I wanted to date. And with my last relationship and it being my first relationship, I had it in my mind that like, okay, like this is my person. We finna be together. And that's that. And looking back, I now see why people were looking at me crazy, because here's the thing too that was like really frustrating. I feel like people were rooting for us to work until it became apparent that it was my first relationship. And then it almost felt like everybody was kind of just like, oh, okay, so this isn't going to work then because it's your first relationship. And I'm like, why does that have to be the path for everybody? Why is it that your first relationship always has to be this toxic, traumatizing experience? Like, why can't people just have the love that they deserve, upright? And so that really bothered me. But then I became even more frustrated because I ended up proving everybody right. Like, that relationship didn't work out. It was not healthy at all. It took a huge toll on my mental health and my self-esteem. And, coming out of that, I did have to question, like, okay, how did I end up in this type of relationship? Why did I stay for as long as I did? Why did I put up with as much as I put up with? And a big part of it was just that lack of experience, because I went into it thinking of relationships in a certain way, and my non-negotiables were very different back then than they are now. And as sad as it is, and I hate that it is this way, but there are times where sometimes you have to go through a relationship like that to really know what to look out for. Even though, again, I don't. That's why I say sometimes you have to go through that, because I don't believe that everybody needs to go through that. Because people will often say too that sometimes you have to be with someone toxic in order to appreciate someone that'll treat you well. I don't claim that at all. Okay, I did not need to get treated horribly in order to. I would have appreciated someone nice and kind and compassionate the first go around. Okay, I didn't need to experience anyone being mean and not treating me right. Like there was no that was not something that I was looking for or anything. It's just, I think that the main thing that I learned is just things to not tolerate and put up with, even though I still to this day feel like I didn't deserve what I went through. But at the very least, I can take the experience that I have from that situation and say, okay, I don't ever want to experience this again. And so, for people like, again, Halle and Skai and Keke, right? There's been a lot of themes of domestic abuse, and I've never experienced domestic abuse, but for them and going through something like that, it's not even just as plain as simple as, okay, well, don't be with someone that's going to be abusive. Like, it's not that simple. And I hate when people act like, folks are abusive just right out the gate. Like, that's not how that works. A lot of the times when you are with someone that is toxic, it doesn't start out that way. They start out being everything that you want. They pretty much present themselves as a perfect partner. And then it's not until later on, when feelings are involved, when time has gone by and they've pretty much have gotten you attached to them, that's when they start acting up. And so I think that they are now learning like some of the red flags that maybe they overlooked in the beginning, and the type of person that they want to be with in the future, moving forward, moving past this relationship. Even though I did hear that Keke and Darius ended up back together, I don't know, but I'm gonna speak as if, because again, nothing's been confirmed, so I'm gonna speak as if they are not. But yeah, it's unfortunate that so many women, again, not just celebrities, this is not a celebrity specific topic, this happens to everyday women all the time. There are plenty of women out there that end up in toxic, abusive relationships, and there's been a lot of conversations around like, how do we prevent this from happening, because it seems to be happening more. And the conversation of accountability is touchy, right? Because you obviously don't want to victim blame, and you want to always extend grace for people that have been in those situations, and you don't want to blame the person that was getting abused for them getting abused, right? I think there are conversations happening around why they picked those people in the first place, why they maybe stayed longer than they should have. But again, this is a conversation that's been happening around abuse for years, for decades, about how women end up in these relationships and how hard hard it is for them to leave. You know, we see that conversation happening with Cassie, right? People are like, oh, why did it take her so long to leave? And people even, you know, having doubts about Cassie wanting to leave and saying that, oh, she wanted to be there and she wanted to be doing those things. I'm sorry. There is not a single woman in the world, like, the things that Cassie went through were disgusting. They were horrifying. And the girl literally said, the woman literally said that she was under the influence, not even just under the influence in terms of drugs and whatever else, you know, Diddy had her taking. She was under, you know, the influence of power. She, like, people don't understand, like, when you are in that type of situation, like, I haven't even been in that type of situation, but I don't feel like I need to be to understand that when you are in that type of situation, it's not easy to leave, especially because she was so young as well. And I feel like, you know, that's not being taken into consideration. And so, you know, there's an element of that with that situation, right? But again, with people like, you know, Halle and Keke and Skai, I even feel like Skai is a different case, because Skai actively went after someone that was in jail. It's like, girl, like, you had to have known what was finna happen. Again, I don't wish abuse on anybody. I don't condone it. I am not saying that she deserved it at all. But at the very least, Skai should have known that this relationship was not going to end well. Maybe not end in abuse, but someone named Yerky can't be trusted. Clearly, again, she picked up the man from prison. Like, you can't. Anyway, but I say all that to say, this is why it is important, you know, if you are someone out there that is, you know, raising a young child, more specifically raising a daughter. I understand it's scary, and I understand that you don't want your daughter to end up with the wrong guy. You don't want them to get their heart broken, but some of these things are inevitable. So you might as well allow it to happen under your own roof, where you can monitor, where you can be involved, where you can help your child to work through that, and also be preventative with it as well. Like, I know for a lot of us, we never had any serious talks or conversations about dating at all. Like, even if it's a situation where, okay, you don't want to allow your child to date, but at least have the conversations with them about, okay, this is how a man should treat you, and this is what you should, you know, require, and these are what your boundaries should look like. These type of conversations are just not happening enough. I'm sure they're happening in some households, but for the most part, especially with, you know, the Black community, we're not having those conversations about how to date, how to court, and, you know, all of that.
You teaching your kids how to date? Like, are you actively involved in showing them what dating looks like? And I'm talking about pretty early, like high school. And what I mean by teaching them how to date, like, are you actively involved in the dating process with them? So if your son or daughter comes home and they say, I like so-and-so, you're like, what you like about him? What you like about her? Asking the tough questions so that they really figure out what they like, what they don't like, what their type is, and things like that. You really got to have these conversations. Otherwise, you're setting them up for failure, because sometimes we wait too long to show them what dating is. And then when they get to college, they looking crazy because they like, oh my goodness, nobody told me this was even out here. Like, I haven't even held a hand.
You know the reason why you get played, especially in the beginning of dating, you early on, 18, 19 years old, because you don't know nothing. Especially the girls. Y'all enter a world that you were not equipped to play. You're entering a game that you were not equipped to play in. You don't have the tools, right? You jump into a world, especially at 18, that high school shit don't matter. But when you jump into from 18 and you jump into the real world dating, and you know nothing about dating, you know nothing about your opponent, you know nothing about how the opposite gender works, you are doomed to fail.
I really think it's causing more harm than good. Because like I said, when you are older, there's way more stakes. Like, again, people can end up having kids with the wrong person. And when there's kids involved, when you are starting to plan a future with a person, like, there's way more at stake. And so the heartbreak behind that too is way more intense. Like, that's kind of how it was for me. Like, I had literally planned an entire future around a person, and then all of that just like ended and disappeared out of nowhere, and I had to just like start over and get used to that person not being in my life, even though I thought this was someone that I was going to marry and have kids with. And then one day I had to just start all over and have that person completely removed out of my life. And again, I wish I would have been able to have my first heartbreak without all of those like lingering things of like marriage and kids, because I also feel like that's why I tolerated more than I should have, because that was my goal. Like my goal was to be with this person forever and to get married. And because that was such a big lingering thing over my head, there was a lot of things that I forgave and that I was overly patient about, because I'm like, okay, we have to get to the end goal of this thing. And it's not to say that I didn't have non-negotiables. It's not to say that I didn't have boundaries, even though, to be completely honest, I didn't have a whole lot of boundaries. But I went into that relationship with the mindset of, okay, as long as this person isn't cheating on me, and as long as this person isn't putting their hands on me, everything else can be worked out. Like that was literally my mindset going into my last relationship. As long as there's no cheating and no domestic abuse, I'm good. And again, now looking back in hindsight, I'm like, okay, I have way more things to add to my list now because of things that I experienced that I'm not okay with and that I would not be okay with going through again. But like, imagine though, if I had been able to have that type of relationship in high school, that meant that by the time I got to college, I could take that experience with me and then have firmer boundaries going into the next one. But again, I didn't know any better and I wasn't allowed to, have that experience. And so for the parents out there that are raising daughters, I would encourage to at least let your child have some type of like maybe supervised date, like at least let them get their feet wet with dating and courting, just so they can learn how that is supposed to go before they're just thrown out there to the wolves. Because again, even though a lot of women are out here without that dating experience, you can't really say the same for men. And again, obviously it's not all. There are some men that grew up having the same experience, but a lot of them were allowed to date. They were allowed to do their thing and to get stuff out their system. And these are the type of boys that are taking advantage of the girls that don't have that experience, and you don't want that either. And so, again, I understand where the need to shelter comes from, but I really encourage parents out there to just allow your child to at bare minimum have a conversation. Have a conversation about how you want your child to be treated when it comes to dating, what their non-negotiables should be, and also setting the example is really important. Again, I know for a lot of us, we come from broken homes where we didn't have a lot of examples of healthy family dynamics that can also play a factor as well. If you grew up in a toxic environment, or if you grew up and you never saw your parents together, that could have an impact as well. Like, I think just being able to have those conversations and to have examples, to be able to see what healthy love looks like, I think makes a world of a difference. Because again, for me, I did not see a ton of that. A lot of the relationships that I saw were either people around me, peers, friends of mine, or on TV through movies or through YouTube. Like, that's kind of where I got a lot of my examples of relationships from. And so, and again, I know things happen. I'm definitely not telling anybody to just stay together for the kids or to put on a front or a facade so their kid can see what that looks like. I'm not saying that at all. But if you are able to, even if it's just an aunt and an uncle, or just being able to show them some example of what healthy love looks like, I think is really important, so that they don't end up choosing terrible men. Because again, a lot of the times when that happens is due to a lot of the factors that I mentioned in this video. It's really unfortunate. I hate to see all of these news reports about these women being in domestic disputes and having to file restraining orders and full custody and all of that. Like, it's really, really tough right now for Black women in media and just in the world. It's been really tough just seeing everything that's been happening. And like I've spoken about before, there's a lot of gender wars happening as well. It doesn't feel quite safe for Black women and just women in general right now. Again, obviously it's not all. I'm not saying all men are dangerous or all men are abusive. I don't believe that. I know men. I have men in my life that are not that way, but that doesn't negate the fact that there are still a lot of men out there that are like that. I literally just had a situation in my apartment complex with a domestic dispute, which I actually might talk about that in a members only video because that whole situation was crazy. But yeah, y'all, like there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of women that are in unsafe situations, and I again would never blame the woman for being abused. However, I do think it is important to have conversations so then that way we can prevent these situations from happening in the future, and being able to equip women with the tools and the discernment to be able to avoid getting into these situations in the first place. And again, I feel bad for the women that have to experience things like this. I feel bad for any kids that are involved, and I'm just praying for everybody. Honestly, I'm praying that everyone's, situations get better except for Diddy. And yeah, I just want better for Black women. I want better for women, and I think that starts with having these important conversations. But yeah, those are all of my thoughts on today's topic. If you guys have any thoughts, feel free to share them in the comments down below, but be respectful while you are discussing in the comment section. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys go ahead, give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.